Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining this important conversation today on power shifting philanthropy. Before we begin, I would like to draw your attention to some important information we have in the chat. There are a couple of housekeeping points as well as instructions on how to access the English, Spanish, and French interpretation. Please take a look at those as we get started. I'm Leslie Tai, and I'll be your moderator for the session. I serve as Director of Social Impact for the Chandler Foundation, where we advocate for systems change and invest in organizations that are partnering with government to improve the enabling conditions for prosperity. We have a terrific panel for you today, and I will introduce them shortly. The session will run 45 minutes, which will include one round of moderated questions before we turn to the participants for a Q&A. So let me begin by introducing our panel. First is Mohammed Lamin Sadikan. Mohammed is a human rights activist and movement coordinator at Africans Rising for Justice, Peace, and Dignity, a Pan-African grassroots movement. In 2017, he initiated a #NotTooYoungToRun campaign that supported 6 young people to win elections for seats in the National Assembly of the Gambia. He is the winner of many awards, including recognition as one of the most influential people of African descent under 40. Anne Muthoni is a 24-year-old social change agent from Kenya. Her main focus is in art, climate change, and technology. She is currently a young leader in the Youth Compact Champions program, which collaborates with over 60 organizations to improve humanitarian action with and for young people around the world. In her role, she is supporting the design and coordination of the Youth Fund. Lior Ip is the CEO of the Roddenberry Foundation, where he has spearheaded the launch of multiple initiatives, including a global grants program for early stage projects, an annual activist fellowship, and a network-based fund to fight COVID-19. Previously, Lior served as the CEO of Breakthrough Collaborative. He was the global director for Ashoka's Youth Venture, and co-founder of an education software company. And before I get to our panel, allow me to frame the topic. Traditional approaches to governance and development often ignore young people as agents of change. Actors with power, whether philanthropic or government, often pigeonhole youth civil society into delivery or online voice roles, rather than valuing them as strategic actors with an equal place at the decision-making table. The power imbalance between funders and grantees can be problematic in any context, but the challenge is particularly pronounced for youth organizations. Research done by the Development Alternative has found that youth organizations are often in precarious financial situations, over-rely on volunteers, and are barely surviving. These barriers prevent us from unlocking the potential of the largest youth generation in history. And on this panel, we will have a frank and open dialogue between young people and donors to explore what we can do to shift the power in such a way that accelerates the positive change spearheaded by youth organizations. So I will begin by asking the panel one question each, and then I encourage viewers to type your questions during the discussion in the comment box so that we can dive in immediately after. So first, I'll begin with you, Anne. And the Youth Fund is a new fund designed by young people to support youth action around the world. The first round supported youth response to COVID-19, and the second will support climate action. Can you explain a bit more about this fund, why it was set up, and what impact you want it to have?
So thank you so much for giving me this chance to speak. So my name is Anne Muthoni. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. And I'm currently the chairperson of a community-based organization in Kenya that is called the Youth Arts Mentorship Initiative that aims at imparting artistic and entrepreneurial skills to the unprivileged youth in Kenya. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, so in July 2020, I was able to join the Youth Compact Champions program. So it's a program that comprises of 20 young people working with 60 other committed organizations that are aiming to support humanitarian action with and for the young people. So the Youth Compact Champions program itself aims at improving the effectiveness and quality of humanitarian action by the young people. So what you see there is a group of the 20 organizations. Slide, please. So in August 2020, the Youth Compact champions were able to design a fund. It's called the Youth Fund. And for this particular chapter of our funding, we decided to fund COVID-19 response projects that are being carried out by the young people. So the reason as to why we decided to fund COVID-19 response was because we were able to identify that the young people were actually playing a key role as frontline workers responding to COVID-19. So we were able to also identify that the biggest challenge that they were facing while conducting their response to COVID-19 was the lack of funding. Yeah. So we were able to identify this challenge and decided to chip in and give financial support to these youth projects and enable them to scale up and reach out to more people and also improve the quality of service and products that they were willing to offer to the vulnerable groups that they were serving. So this youth fund was actually a unique fund because we were able to bring about a paradigm shift when you think about grant making. And this is because the Youth Compact champions were involved in the entire process of the grant making. So you can imagine they were involved in the designing of the call, the launching of the call, the selection process, the due diligence and safeguarding process, all the way to the distribution of the funds. And currently, the Youth Compact champions are actually offering mentorship to the 10 grantees that we were able to distribute the funds to. So we had a total of 50,000 USD that we were able to distribute to the 10. So we distributed around 5,000 USD to each and every grantee that we were able to fund. Next slide, please. So we were able to fund a diverse group of grantees. So we have grantees that are responding to the LGBTIQ community. We have grantees that are in the health space, and we have others in the environmental space, among others. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, so you can see the map. So this is a map of all the 10 organizations that we've been able to fund. We have some in Africa. Yeah, we have some in Asia. Yeah. Next slide, please. This is one of the organizations that I was able to interact with while conducting the selection of the grantees. It's called the Albino Trust Zimbabwe, and they are doing quite an amazing job because they were aiming at supporting 2,000 people using this fund. They were aiming at supporting 2,000 people by distributing food and clothes items to them. Next slide, please. I'm also currently offering mentorship to Udhabiti Health. It's also a community-based organization in Kenya that aims at saving lives from fake medicine and vaccine, and they're targeting people from the urban setups that are informal settlements. Next slide, please. So we were able to, from our statistics, we were able to realize that from the 868 applications that we received, if we had around 434,000 USD, we would have been able to support all of them, and our impact would have been to 16.4 million people around the globe. Next slide, please. So currently, we are working towards another round of funds, and we want it to be around climate action. And as we speak, we are in current talks with Africans Rising and trying to see how well we can work together and continue to support the young people in their noble actions, trying to make this world a better place. And so we are looking to expand our funds so that we can support the climate action as well as the Youth Compact champions, because the real champions, they need a bit of financial support to do the same. So this is currently where we are. And to the donors in the house, I believe that we can work together and enable the young people to make this world a better place. So we, the Youth Compact champions, believe in the young people. And my question to you is, do you believe in the young people? Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Super exciting work that you're doing, and hopefully there are funders on the call who might be interested, and also youth social entrepreneurs who will be able to participate in the next call. So the next question is for Lior. There has been powerful research recently published by organizations such as Civicus and Restless Development that reveals many youth civil society organizations feel they are at the mercy of donor funding systems. These are systems that are often short-term, highly restrictive, and prohibitive of institutional development. Reflecting on your work at the Roddenberry Foundation, how can philanthropy and donors shift the power back to youth organizations and ensure more flexible and long-term approaches to funding?
Thanks, Leslie. Yeah, I think that there are a number of issues related to the challenges that young people face in the funding space. And I think that there's two ways to look at it. One is the funders themselves and what they can do differently, and then maybe what young organizations can do. I think for funders, unfortunately, many are too risk averse and are unwilling to take the risk on funding young people who are doing unbelievable work. And I think, yes, we recognize that the organizations do tend to be smaller. They don't have as long of a track record. And the people who are leading them don't have as long of a track record. But that doesn't mean that the impact and the type of work and the quality of the work isn't where it needs to be. And I'll give a very specific example. The Roddenberry Foundation a few months ago launched the Plus Global Fund, which is a network of networks fund to address COVID-19. And we are working with a number of large organizational partners to do this work, including Acumen and Ashoka and the Resolution Project and the Obama Fellows. And what we were able to see in this process is that the social ventures and the social entrepreneurs, the young social entrepreneurs who we were evaluating in addition to, or looking at Acumen and Ashoka, for instance, were just as good as and the folks who've been around for a lot longer than they have. And so, we were evaluating about 250 organizations across 44 countries. So it's a great example that young people are doing really important work. It's impact driven. It's systems change. It's speaking to creative and innovative solutions that are, in our minds as funders, equal to the work that's being done by their older peers. So I think funders need to take a risk. I think it's a missed opportunity for funders to not look at the youth space and to get involved and to invest in the space. I think for the organizations themselves, for young people who obviously don't have a lot of funding because of the system, I think that there are a number of ways to think about what they can be doing while they're looking for funding. So one, I think partnerships is an important piece to this puzzle. I think that funders want and need to have some assurance that the organizations are doing the work that they say they're doing, and it's having impact. So I think the extent to which young people and young organizations can develop partnerships, particularly with institutional organizations, goes a long way. I think setting up boards and boards of advisors is super helpful. I think any amount of media that validates the work that they're doing is really important and helpful. I think understanding the landscape and looking at other folks in the space who are doing similar work and thinking about how they can work with them or partner with is an important piece to this. I think that there are a number of really interesting youth-focused fellowship programs like the Resolution Project that I mentioned earlier, but there's also Unison Youth, there's Echoing Green, there's Uncharted, Next Generation Leaders Program. There are a number of fellowship programs designed for young people specifically that folks can get involved with where there is funding. Finally, I think that from a funder's perspective, narrative and storytelling is important. We want to know and understand who you are as an individual, why you're doing your work, how you fit into the broader landscape or the ecosystem. And so for young people doing this work, I always encourage them to think through what their story is and what their narrative is and how they can best articulate that to funders. And so spend the time thinking about what makes you different, what your vision is for the future, how the work that you're doing fits into different gaps within the broader landscape, and why we as funders should invest in you. So I think between getting more funders to be less risk averse and jump into the space, I can't say this strongly, more strongly, it is worth investing in young people and their organizations. And I think for young people doing this work, keep doing it. There are funders out there interested in you. There are specific fellowships designed for young people and young social entrepreneurs. And hopefully we'll find a space next year with more COVID funding for people to come together and fund the space more deeply.
Thanks, Lior. I know as a funder, I learned a lot from the insights that you just shared, and hopefully for the young people out there, the resources that you just mentioned will be a good place to start for their search for additional funding to resource their great initiatives. So Lamine, next to you, the Get Up, Rise Up Fund is an exciting funding model that makes resources available to local groups, both registered and unregistered, that often find themselves under-resourced. This fund has been piloted for an initial 6 months. Can you share some of the main challenges you encountered, but also some of the key lessons learned that you would like other donors and philanthropists to take on board? You're still on mute, Lamine.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, and good afternoon from Senegal, Dakar. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, the Get Up Rise Up Fund have came out of critical thinking of a challenge that a lot of youth movements, women movements are faced with. We have seen that movements come together to really change things faster and better for their society, but they're challenged with funds that will be able to help them to be able to react quickly on issues. So ActionAid, Denmark, and Beautiful Tropical Africans Rising thought of this particular fund to test and make funds accessible to these groups quickly with means of transferring the funds, and make it flexible for them to be able to apply the funds. And they go through a vetting process by a panel of team members from district organizations who will vet and select and score based on the justification that these applications will give. We are given a range of $100 to $1,000 to these applications, where the applications, how convincing they are, they can have up to $1,000. The challenge is we are not able to, give these funds quickly to the people. Like when I say quickly, I'm talking about in 2 weeks or in 1 week time. And this is one thing that I think is critically missing in the funding space that we are still not able to address because there are a lot of administrative issues that have to go through. Africans Rising actually is not hosting the fund, because from the onset, we don't want to be, as a Pan-African movement, we don't want to be categorized as a funder, but also want to be seen as a facilitator of funding mechanisms to make funding available and accessible, easily accessible to movements, especially youth movements that we work with, and grassroots-based youth organizations that are transforming and changing systems and society to become better. So it has been a great learning for now. Across Africa, the fund have been supporting different groups from east to north, south to west. Now we have expanded with $150,000 allocated for this fund. We're now going into Asia. We've just recently give some money to groups in Philippines, youth groups in Philippines. Most of the funds are distributed to young people. Let me say about 99% of the funds are actually going to the young people with the applications, youth movements, and organizations. It is critical to say that, foundations and donors really need to really build that trust relationship between them and youth organizers, because the trust-based mechanism of funding will help fostering change, will help young people to be able to do things better and faster. The bureaucracy in funding and funding mechanisms have really been a challenge for things to move better and faster for these youth led organizations who are registered. And then the procedure of, the criteria that and the procedure of applications and the procedure of vetting and process of allocating funds also kick out a lot of funds. So the beauty about this is this particular fund is, breaking down all those barriers, breaking down all those challenges, and making youth organizations and networks and movements funds available to them at their doorstep, though in small amount of money, but obviously it's kind of changing lives. Recently, we are now thinking of even new ideas. We have started a conversation with Restless Development in the aspect of creating a youth climate fund that obviously will, if funded and supported, will kind of create more youth-friendly and faster mechanisms of funds to be available on the doorsteps of youth-led, youth-focused climate action groups to be able to react and stop things. I live in Africa. We have seen our government been very brutal and very bad in cutting down forests, evicting people, and the response always comes from the young people and their organizations. But the support in terms of them acting to really stop all these injustices is very limited and sometimes comes very slowly because of the bureaucracy that is in the systems. So I will stop here and then take more questions later. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Lamine, for that great information about the fund and on your closing point about the importance of speed when it comes to these youth movements that are often the first to respond to important social issues. So now we'll open up the questions for the participants in the audience. And we've had a few come in already. And the first is, how can we support young people to overcome the often very burdensome tech and organizational rules and regulations that surround receiving donor funding? So I think this goes to perhaps some of the reporting requirements and perhaps some of the other burdensome application requirements when it comes to funding. So I'll open it up to our panelists.
Yeah, just to comment quickly, just to say that it is critical for funders to see that it is the primary aim of creating a foundation or wanting to support is to effect change, and then that is a momentum that is created for change, for that change to happen. So we must be very much smart enough to see that momentum and see how do we support groups that are leading those momentums to be effective. So as I said earlier, the aspect of relations and the process of funding relations to be built on trust, like these young people and youth organizations and movements actually build these organizations based on trust. And then they have systems internally that holds each other accountable, that hold them accountable to ensure that the systems, the young people there are delivering based on what is required. So the revision and the flexibility in terms of processes of application is critical. So it could be a challenge to all funders to now revisit and see how they can make it more flexible and user-friendly. Again, the aspect of reporting also make it a very big challenge for them to really respond. So it's important if we really want to see change and change faster. We have seen young people doing it without and with limited support coming from foundations. So with foundation support, NGO support, it will fast track and deliver the change that they anticipated to support and see.
Thank you, Lamine. And Leor, maybe I'll also direct a question at you, because I know with some of the funds at the Roddenberry Foundation, there are some innovative ways to overcome, at least on the application side, some of the burdens that might be imposed on youth organizations. So if you can share a little bit about that.
Sure. I think that we have two mechanisms. One, I encourage folks to apply to the Catalyst Fund, which is part of the Roddenberry website. The application is very straightforward, very simple. There's no deadline. We have very limited reporting, and so this is designed for early stage and small organizations, and it is global. So that's the Catalyst Fund at the Roddenberry Foundation. The other, the program that I mentioned earlier, the +1 Global Fund, has no application. It's only based on nominations. And what we've seen is that we are actually able to get as much information as we would get from an application through offering folks who have been nominated, just give us the information they think is important. So, I really would encourage funders to rethink how they go about their funding. We're very wedded to these traditional ways of doing things, cumbersome applications, cumbersome reporting structures, and lots of restrictions. This doesn't need to be the case. And I think as we think about COVID-19 and the impact it's having on the world, if you're not going to make the change now, when will you? I think this is a fantastic opportunity to go to your boards and to suggest that there might be a new and interesting model that doesn't rely on the sort of the typical mechanisms that we've used in the past. And I agree with everyone. I think the reality is this isn't just a problem for young people. I think speak to any grant-seeking organization anywhere, and I think most of them feel like the applications are too long, the reporting is too cumbersome, there are too many hurdles that they need to overcome, and so this is a problem writ large, I think, within our field, and it's something that I encourage all funders to rethink, because it is something we need to change.
Yeah, completely agree. And as I mentioned in my opening statements, this power imbalance is not just between youth organizations and philanthropy, but between any grantor and organization doer organization out there. So, but it's particularly pronounced in the youth context. So it's great to hear these wonderful ideas about how we can overcome some of these barriers. So the next question is for Anne, and the question is, what have you learned from being involved in the grant making process?
Thank you so much for that question. So one of the greatest things that I've been able to learn from the whole process is understanding the donor's perspective when it comes to grant making. So many a times is when we, the young people, apply for grants, and then maybe after, say, 2 weeks, we're just out here, crying and asking, how come you haven't responded to us? Why are you taking so long when it comes to responding to us? So now, being on this other side of the coin, I was able to realize how tedious and how long the process actually is, because we had to do a couple of phases when it came to the selection. Like, we had the long listing, we long listed the 868 applications to 100. Then we went further to shortlist to 25. Then before we could even shortlist to the final 10, there was the due diligence and the safeguarding processes taking place. And all of these processes, we were involved. So it made me have a feel of how much time and effort the donors also put into this. Yeah. So I was able to appreciate their efforts. And also something else that I learned is that at least now I know, when I go to the other side of the coin, I know what the donor is actually looking for. Yeah, when they have clearly outlined their eligibility criteria, I know that then the applicant should actually stick to that. And if at all you don't fit into the eligibility criteria, then you shouldn't really waste so much time trying to apply for the fund, because again, you won't go past the eligibility criteria stage. That is also something else. I didn't really know how serious the eligibility criteria phase is when it comes to the selection process. So I was also able to appreciate that. Yeah. So those are the things that I was able to learn.
Perfect. Thanks, San. And our next question from...
And I mean...
Oh, go ahead, Lior.
Leslie, I could just jump in on that if you like. Yeah, I think Anne's point is great. I think, you know, oftentimes foundations or donors will put a lot of information and put a lot of effort into these application programs. And it oftentimes feels like people aren't really spending the time to look at the eligibility, the criteria, you know, what we're looking for, who we funded in the past. I mean, there is a trove of information out there on our websites that really gives you an indication of what it is that we're looking for. And so, you know, as much as this is a numbers game, I know most of us, when I was doing this before, you apply to 100, you know, foundations hoping to just get one. Your time would be better spent, I think, if you really understand what it is each funder is looking for. Use the language that they're imparting in their information. You know, really, I think tailor each application to each funder. I think it's a really important point that Anne is making.
Great, thank you for that advice, and completely agree, having been on the other side, that it's a better use of time to really invest in the research rather than you know, applying with blindly without doing the background work first. So the next question from the audience is, the best funder grantee relationships are based on trust. How can donors best build trust with youth organizations and vice versa? And transparency presumably has a role here. Lamine, maybe I will draw you out, and based on your experience, if you have any thoughts on this issue. I know you had mentioned the trust point in your talking points earlier as well.
Yeah, I think it is a matter of donors going out of their comfort zone to understand how these organizations are set up, these youth organizations are set up. What is kind of their main motivation, what is the driving factor, what is pulling them together, and how are they organized, how are they making decisions. Then you get to understand and appreciate how these organizations, how these young people and youth networks are taking, how much are they taking to really sacrifice or contribute to changing their society, communities, and changing the world. With that appreciation, will be the starting point of even trusting and believing that these people are very genuine. But it's critical for donors and youth networks and movements to start to have conversations, to have discussions about how they are working, their mode of operandum, the procedures and all of that, and how those procedures will affect the young people when they want to apply for funds. So that conversation is critical. One thing that I need to point out, I did an article that was published on Alliance Magazine about funder philanthropy relationship that I believe should be based on trust. Philanthropy grantee relationship that I believe, especially on movements that are very disjointed. Someone can describe them. They are not registered. They're just coming together to bring change. It's difficult to really trust those people. But anyway, they are on the track. They are on the track of bringing change. Without the support of funders, they will definitely deliver change, but it will be slow. With the support of funders, they will deliver the change faster and better. So it is critical for conversation, relationship to start with conversations between them, to understand how they are operating, and then have conversations around how both sides can adapt to changing one or two things in their ways of operandum, so that facilitation of funding can be easier and can be accessible, can be faster to be delivered to them, so that the process of what we want to achieve can be. There is one critical point that needs to be pointed out is this: the governments and multinational companies that we tend to see violating rights, brutalizing citizens, are always conniving, coming together, in processes of business, in kicking out people from their land, in damaging the environment for their own interests. It is high time for funders and youth networks and movements to also start conniving and coming together to be more flexible. Many governments have been flexible. We have seen many governments being flexible, giving tax breaks, tax evasions, and all of those things to multinational companies to operate, even if they are going to harm the population. They don't care much. So it is high time for funders to also connive and work with networks and groups that they support so that we can effectively fight the injustices that are affecting society. Without this, we will have a long way to go in addressing the challenges that are facing the world today. And young people are ready to lead the way. So funders, come on board, let's do it.
Thanks, Lamine. And I think we have time for maybe 1 to 2 more questions. And I'm going to skip to another question, which is a bit relevant to what you had just mentioned, which is philanthropy not just another way for elites to control development in the global South? How can we make sure philanthropic efforts match actual needs rather than match donors' entrenched interests? And there was a reference to the book, Winners Take All, which is a bit of a skeptical approach to the philanthropic and corporate approach to doing good in the world. So curious if any of our panelists have a perspective on this question.
Yeah, if I will jump in here quickly, I'll not take much time because I've talked enough. But anyway, just to say that it is high time for us to develop homegrown philanthropy. The smaller amount of money that we might think that will not be able to bring change can definitely bring change. We have this strong culture, especially the continent that I'm living in, of giving. But continuous giving, consistent giving is becoming a challenge. So it's high time for us to build those systems so that the elites and the powerful philanthropists can see that, collective of communities with a platform of giving can definitely fund and, support certain groups to change things. And at Africans Rising, one of our ambitions is to be self-funded. We are running an initiative called Individual Giving Initiative, where we are asking every African to give $1 per month, $12 in a year, to be able to mobilize enough funds to be able to respond to the needs of Africans wherever they are when they rise up. So, but the process of collecting this small money is becoming a challenge with mechanisms. So, but it's about the mindset. We need to really change the mindset so that the bigger philanthropists who have captured this space can see that, yes, communities are also ready to contribute to this space. They can also change their lives and they can bring a better livelihood for people by responding. We have seen it happening in many countries like Kenya, like Nigeria, like Senegal, and many other places where communities and countrymen and women respond to crisis when the need comes. So how much can we replicate this in society, and including transparency and accountability in it will definitely will close down that space of philanthropic capture by elites. I call it.
Anne or Lior, any additional points you'd like to add here? Or I can move on to the next question. Go ahead, Lior.
I mean, look, I think it's a real issue. I think that it is incumbent on funders to think about how to do things differently. And I think that a lot of them are. I think that they're, for every 5 or 6 foundations who sort of who aren't doing this in the way that they should and are sort of perpetuating bad practices, I think that there are really progressive foundations out there who are doing really good work. And so I think we need to have more of these kinds of conversations and bring in the folks who are not part of these conversations so that we can show them that it's both safe to trust the folks that we're supporting, that there are different and better ways of doing philanthropy, doing so will have great impact on behalf of the communities that we're all working on behalf of. So I think it's a good point, but unfortunately we work in these ecosystems and we're reliant on each other to do that. So I think trust goes both ways. And I think I encourage folks to seek out those foundations or organizations who are doing this for the right reasons and doing it a little bit differently than traditional funders do. And they're out there. I mean, they're definitely out. It just requires a little bit of effort to find them.
Great, thanks, Lior. I think we have time for one more quick question. So, and I think this goes to some of the points that were mentioned earlier. How can we ensure that young people are able to overcome the unequal power relationships that often exist? Unequal relationships that often lead to the work being donor-led and not issue-led. And maybe Anne, I'll direct this question at you for any closing thoughts in this last question.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And I think one of the ways in which we can make this whole philanthropy more issue-led and not donor-led is by shifting the power to the young people and just letting the young people decide on how they want to use the donations that they're being issued. So I think if the young people can be involved from the very early stages of grant making, such that they are given a chance to even, air their views and concerns and just thoughts about the issues that they want to solve, then I think it would be more issue-centered than donor-centered. So I think it's just an issue of allowing the young people to just have that power to make decisions on whatever it is that they want, and not just issuing the money to the young people and giving them terms and conditions on how to use it. So it's just about giving them full power and just letting them decide. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And I know we had a few more wonderful questions come in, but unfortunately we are getting close to the 9:45 cutoff. So I just wanted to close by thanking all of our panelists who've offered such insightful perspectives into the issue of power shifting philanthropy. Some of the themes that arose from today's conversation include building trust between donors and youth organizations, how to overcome the shorter track records of youth organizations through other trust building mechanisms, and how donors can respond with speed to fast moving youth movements, among many other great and insightful points. I hope that these insights will help all of us be more effective in our roles as we seek to contribute to a more open governance system. And just to close, I wanted to quickly point out a few items. So one is, if anyone would like further information from today's session, please reach out to Freya. I think there's her contact information. And also, before you leave, we have a couple announcements about the summit. So the summit is offering 3 ancillary activities for participants to engage and connect. First is the participant map. For those who filled out the summit registration form and opted into sharing your information, you are on the map and you can take a look at who else is working on open governance issues in your country, and if you'd like to connect on LinkedIn. And second, there is a participant matching program that connects participants who want to develop skills with those who would be willing to teach those skills. So fill out the form with a skill you'd like to develop and a skill you'd be willing to teach. And third, there is a Summit social media challenge. Participants are encouraged to share a short 1-minute maximum video on social media on what innovations or stimulus plans you think your country should consider in order to support youth during the pandemic. And be sure to use the summit hashtags and tag Accountability Lab, Restless Development, and Open Government Partnership if you want to have your video featured during the summit. And in terms of the next session, after this one, the agenda is for a panel with African Network of Youth Policy Experts. So please stay tuned for that session, which will start on the hour. In the meantime, please feel free to take a break, or if you'd like to stay on Zoom, we have a video for you to enjoy. Thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you, Lisa.